Hi, everybody, and welcome to Under the Hood, and welcome to my guest, Chris Hilliard. Post-summer, after Labor Day, back to work. So happy to see you, Chris.
It's
And
good to
as
see
I
you as
just
well,
said to
too.
you, yeah, as I said, sometimes I kind of type out your profile, and other times I let you tell me a little bit about yourself. So tell us the highlights of your professional work, and then I'll come back and ask you some other questions.
Sounds good. Yeah. No, I've spent my entire career in compliance, legal and compliance, and really a lot in consumer protection. I kind of fell into it while in college and have worked ever since then. Starting off as a litigation manager and working in the office of the president at Ameriquest Mortgage Company. So I've worked at a couple of the companies that have been the harbingers of doom for the world, but not in a capacity that I did anything other than trying to help people. So I spent some time at Lehman Brothers Bank as well too. I was there
Yes.
2 years pre-bankruptcy and 3 years post-bankruptcy. So they're cleaning up and trying to ensure that all of the customers were taken care of and that we exited operations in a decent and appropriate manner. Spent a lot of time getting banks out of consent orders, as well as trying to build compliance programs. I was on the executive team at a company called Happy Money, formerly Payoff. I was employee number 20. And we were an online financial wellness and lending company that used behavioral analysis to try to better serve consumers, meaning if your normal practice is you'd rather answer a text message than pick up a phone call because there might be anxiety associated with the phone call, we would try to service that consumer in a way that didn't harm them from a mental health perspective and things like that. And then most recently, I helped co-found a company that's owned by the Orrick law firm, so one of the top 50 law firms in the world. Previously owned by a boutique financial services law firm called Buckley, which was a law firm that I had used when I was not owned, when my company was not owned by it for a number of years. But Winnow, my company, we do online regulatory compliance research for financial services and all of the in between. And we really built it to be able to kind of democratize that data that is not necessarily easily accessible or readily apparent to startups and fintechs and also banks and credit unions and things like that, but really to be able to ensure that they are up to date on the rules that are applicable to them as well as following the rules that are applicable to them. So
Very cool. So I already hear a wonderful thread that we're going to go back. And that's a very, very impressive resume. So, and you look very too young to have so much experience.
If you say so.
But let me ask you a question, okay? Since this podcast is always about patterns that are created in childhood impact us as grown-ups, and you and I spoke a little bit, a little while ago before this podcast, and I have a pretty good sense about you and your attention to integrity. So tell us a little bit about your family of origin and how and again, that was my observation. You may have different thoughts, but how these patterns that you've created from your childhood have impacted you in your present day life.
Sure, no, and I appreciate the opportunity. My parents were amazing people. Unfortunately, they both have since passed unexpectedly and way too young. But being raised, my brother and I, it was just my brother and I, we were the first generation to complete college, go through it, and my parents were sacrificing of every possible thing they could sacrifice in order to get us through that. My father was a general contractor for 42 years, was a union man, proud member of his carpentry union. My mother had worked a number of different jobs, but most recently, before she had passed away, she was a regional manager for Hallmark. She was ensuring that stock was appropriate and greeting cards and things like that. But their jobs didn't define them. It really was more along the lines of even if it negatively impacted them or potentially negatively impacted the family, they always made the right decision. They made the just decision for if I mean, my father, if we would be walking down the street and saw a wallet on the ground that was full of cash, would pick it up and we would, honestly take it to a police station or to the local store right there. It wasn't something that I don't even think he even thought about, removing cash from it or benefiting from it in any way. That was the type of guy he was, and my mother was very similar. So from a very early age, my brother and I were instilled with the values of not only ensuring that we're kind and just to our fellow human beings, but at the same time, I wouldn't say that they would consider it karma in that sense, but
Right,
that's
right.
what I considered it as being, and that's what really impacted me in terms of trying to find a position that also helped me protect consumers from abuse and general rule breaking by organizations and companies that would otherwise try to take advantage of that relationship.
So let me ask you this. So when you see or have seen injustice, because that's kind of, again, what I'm hearing, what's the reaction? How do you deal with that? How do you handle that?
Depending upon the situation and the scenario, I mean, I've gone anywhere from being, steadily annoyed and wanting to do something all the way on up to apoplectic. There were, thankfully, some of the companies that I did work for certainly have a bad rap, and it's rightfully so, don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But in the positions that I was in, not only at AmeriQuest and at Lehman Brothers, I was empowered to actually make things right, to ensure that there was a compensation or an action that would otherwise be beneficial to a consumer that was wronged. So it put me in a good position to be able to say, all right, well, look, we should not have been doing X, Y, or Z. So I can now actually make it up to this customer and try to show them that there is some sort of shred of appropriateness and dignity in the business world to be able to get them back on their feet the way they should be.
Yes. So I have a really good friend, and I think the motto of her company is we always leave them better than we found them.
It's a great
And,
motto.
right? And that's kind of what I'm hearing from you. So what I do know is none of us are perfect, and there's a lot of things that we have to learn, no matter how wonderful our parents were. And it sounds like your parents really were terrific. What were some of the patterns that you developed that you had to kind of take a look at and say, this one doesn't work for me, gets me into trouble, or tell us a story of something that you kind of look back on and say, oh.
I mean, honestly, when you look at short-term gain, that's the biggest thing that always stuck in my mind. I was a political science major. I double majored in political science and international relations in college, and being able to study the political ecosystems was a significant leg up in getting into the business world. Seeing where there was systemic injustice, where there was honestly, not sugarcoating it, systemic racism, or, I mean, for me, you can look at me, anyone that's watching this can look at me and say, all right, well, he's a cisgender white man. So I am of the most privileged position in society. And I recognize that early on, and we try to instill that in our children, as saying, hey, look, this privilege that you have. It's interesting because my wife's Vietnamese, our kids are mixed, which is great, but they tend to have a more predominant Caucasian look than an Asian look, and trying to explain to them that they ultimately will be treated differently than their cousins that look more Asian it's depressing, but it's necessary, because I'm a big believer, and I think you and I bonded as it relates to this. I'm a big believer in the fact that nothing that we have is guaranteed. Nothing should be taken for granted. Anything that I have, that I've earned, yes, I've worked hard for it, but a lot of it comes from, a significant portion, it comes from luck, blessing, whatever you want to call it, and the kindness of others. And I've been very privileged to be able to have people believe in me along the way in my career. I want to do the same for everyone I possibly can. I participate in Future Leaders of Tomorrow with trade organizations. I was way back at AmeriQuest. I was a co-founder on the board of the Women in Leadership group, trying to help people that would otherwise be systemically marginalized have a voice, have an ability to get the same breaks that I did. And I'm a father of a daughter as well too, and I don't want her to go into a systemically underrepresented, or where women are underrepresented and over potentially over scrutinized when they shouldn't be, when it's still.
So let me ask you this, Chris, because I love the values, and as we did talk before, we do share these values, and from your experience, you're already telling us, that it's times that people have bucked up against those values, right?
Yeah.
And so, how would you, given the political divide that we have and the craziness that's going on in our world, it's not just our country, it's the world. How can you use this position that you have, and you're using it, I know, in your civic abilities. As you were talking, before you said that you went to international studies, I said, this man needs to be a diplomat or a politician. Tell me if you've ever thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm privileged in my career to be able to speak to and talk with some amazing individuals. Part of what I do a lot of speaking engagements at conferences and really all over the country. Not as much internationally lately, but all over the country, and it puts me in a room with. I mean, I've got one of my all-time favorite pictures that I've taken recently is with Senator Elizabeth Warren. I've tried to, when I've been in D.C. And I'm very privileged to be able to meet senators and congresspeople. I've tried to take a picture with every female senator and bring them back and show them to my daughter and talk to them. And Senator Warren was an absolutely amazing person to speak to, and she took the time, and so is Senator Mary Cortez Masto, and talking about both of our daughters being in softball and being able to talking about my son and how he's growing into being an ally and helping move the world forward, but being able to have that type of interaction and on both sides of the aisle. I mentioned Democrats, but also talking with Congressman Mike Flood and Congressman French Hill. You can still find some congressional leaders that are not as as radicalized as others. Not everyone is out there screaming from the far left or the far right, which is great. And it's finding those people, talking with them, and trying to help, propagate a environment at least of understanding. It doesn't necessarily have to be everyone loves each other and whatnot, but at least not screaming at one another from the rafters. So I would say that being able to have that type of interaction and talking with not only with congressional leaders, but also with business leaders as well too, trying to find a way forward and finding statespeople among those individuals is paramount. And I'm truly hopeful that this next generation, as we see people retiring and whatnot, will not be as radicalized as honestly as my generation is currently in Congress and whatnot.
Well, again, I put it in your ear, and I'm sure I'm not the first person, but anytime that you want to run for office, let me know.
I definitely want to find a way to give back more than I am, and that may be the way, but I think there's some other things I've got to help change before I can do that.
Yeah. So let me go back a little bit too, again, and you have a lot of wisdom. And you are actually doing what you say. It's not just talk, because I can all the things that you're sharing. But what were some of the kind of aha moments where you said to yourself, I need to change, where things were not working so great for you? Can you think back on that?
Yeah, I mean, looking at the way in which, because this is a big part of my career, looking at the way in which lending and lending specifically to low to moderate income individuals, to persons of color, how that has been dramatically impacted for the better by automated underwriting and artificial intelligence, in specific, that part of lending is huge. People, a lot of folks will say, well, there's not an inherent bias in individuals, and I don't agree with that. I mean, I think every one of us has some sort of inherent bias, even if it's not racially based, it's not financially based.
I'll tell you just the tiny little story that I say about, and I do this a lot in my talks. I love Heinz ketchup. It's the best ketchup in the world. Why? Well, my mother loved it. Do I know?
Exactly.
Do I know if it's the best ketchup in the world? But that is such a simple inherent bias that we would just never even think of, and we have many, many, many of them. So go on.
You're right. No, I mean, like, if you take it back even to musicals. I mean, a lot of people don't. There's not a ton of people that are huge musical fans, at least in my generation at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Getting more with Hamilton, things like that. But if you go back to South Pacific, there's a song in South Pacific that says you have to be carefully taught how to hate. People aren't born into bias. People aren't born into hatred or any type of looking at any type of person as being better than or less than. They're a product of their environment. They're a product of their parents. They're a product of the people around them. So, I mean, don't, as much as you possibly can, don't try to be friends with jerks. Don't surround yourselves with people that are keen to tear other people down as opposed to building people up. Former House Speaker John Boehner, as well as there's kind of a variation of this in other writing as well too, said a leader without followers is just a guy taking a walk, and that's true. So you've got to, if you're trying to be a leader, you're trying to be on the forefront of things, you actually have to find your people. You have to find the folks that believe in what you believe in, or that have some sort of alignment with what you care about to be able to move things forward. And you can do that, but you can't go in.
Who has been in your life, in addition to your dad and your mom, who have been some of the most influential people that have really kind of mentored you, or kind of really kind of encouraged you along the way?
I mean, I'm certain that a lot of folks won't know any of these names or whatnot, but I would say people in my career, the first person that truly gave me a shot was a woman by the name of Darlene Whitman, and she was a director at AmeriQuest Mortgage Company, and she's just the nicest person out there. She's genuinely kind and cares about others and cares about doing the right thing. I tend to gravitate towards those people in my career. I have again, I've been the product of privilege. Don't get me wrong, and I don't take that for granted at all. But I think that I need to do something with that, and doing something with that requires me to find those other people. Mm-hmm. And thankfully, the folks that I work with now, and then the team at Winnow, and the folks at Oric, they all care about things. Oric is on the forefront of diversity and inclusion. They're on the forefront of caring about people actually liking their work environment. So whenever anybody asks, I know that, and they know that I say this, they are expensive. They're expensive lawyers, don't get me wrong, but they're also caring. They give back. Oric is one of the #1 pro bono law firms in the country, in the world really, for that matter. And they actually care about social justice.
So one of the things that you're saying is, and this is for other people that are listening, when you're clear about your own values, and the core things that are really important to you, it's really important to work in that kind of environment, right? So that
wear your values on your sleeve.
Yeah, whatever they are, right? So that you can really expand into the person that you're always meant to be. Because when you're constantly bucking up against, the next manager who doesn't, who's trying to squelch you down, or somebody that's screaming at you, or somebody that's doing any one of those things that put people down. And I know the saying, that people don't leave companies, they leave managers. They leave people who are untrained, and because it's a whole other skill. It's a whole other skill other than, the IP, and the regulations. Managing people is a privilege.
Yeah, exactly. You're entrusted with trying to, help better the people around you as well too, and you shouldn't do it at the cost of another. Ultimately, I mean, it's written in the New York Times every day, but remember the neediest, and honestly, give until it hurts. Do that in your personal life as well as doing that in your business, in your in your profession, in your career or whatnot, because the it sounds cliche, and a lot of people will say, "Oh, it's kind of sounds trite." I don't think it does, but the love and kindness you put into the world, you get back tenfold.
Tenfold.
It's the way it happens.
Yes. Yeah, and I totally agree with you. So let me ask you this question. Um, what are your biggest challenges? What are the things that really kind of keep you up at night, at work, any place, anywhere in your life that, God, if I wish I could kind of nail this one.
And starting kind of on the work side, the ever changing winds of administration goals is certainly something that keeps me up at night. Um, from a impactful thing to my to my actual work, rules and regulations that are either enforced or not enforced, or that kind of flow back and forth on the pendulum of being overbearing to not having any type of rule making authority at all. That keeps me up, and because I know that there are consumers, there are people behind those rules that are either being exploited or not protected, or are taking advantage of others in order to have some unjust gain and things like that. That certainly keeps me up at night. Tracking those and showing them the changes to the companies that subscribe to our product is the main impact, and ensuring that they're up to date. From a personal perspective, I mean, just name it. I'm sitting here with, I've got I've got a copy of the New York Times, a copy of the Wall Street Journal, and a copy of the Financial Times, and every single one of them is a depressing read. But at the same time, you have to have hope, and I think probably it sounds very nebulous and whatnot, but people not having that hope, that scares me. Having a generation that is given up, saying, "Oh, this is just going to be the way it's going to be." No, you can change that, and a voting populace can change that. It takes one individual to be loud and to move forward, but you can't stand there and do nothing because you think it's inevitable, because that's the way that quote
The
unquote
way that
they win.
this all happened, the way
Yeah.
that it happened. I hear you loud and clear, and we're going to blast this, Chris, really. And I hope that when we give you this podcast for you to do, you do the same thing, because
Definitely.
your message is actually a universal message. It's your message, but it's also is for everyone. And I can feel your passion and hear your passion, and I share it, which is why I'm still doing what I do,
And we
because
appreciate that.
yeah, because these are the values, and the thing that you bring out the most is the thing that makes us depressed is feeling that there is no hope. Really, I mean, really, depression is hopeless and helpless. And what you're saying is we may not have a whole lot of hope, but we are not helpless. We are still not helpless, and this is the energy that we need to generate, so that everybody does realize that I have a vote. You know, that
As
is
long as
that
there's
is
still
how.
breath, and yeah, as long as there's still breath in the people that care, then
Yeah,
there's a chance.
absolutely, absolutely, and that's how we got into this situation, because it was voted in, and that's how we can move ourselves forward. So once again, I thank you so much, and I look forward to getting this out online, and getting to know you a little bit better and keeping up this relationship, because you've
Well,
got a
thank
lot
you
of
very
great
much,
work
and I
out there.
appreciate everything you do and you putting this together. It's one of those things where I hope that something I said catches someone, even if it's just a little bit just a little bit of a catch. I hope that something I said inspires someone to take a meaningful step forward, or to be a little bit more sure in themselves to say I can do something, I can make a difference. What I say, what I do, how I act actually does impact others, and hopefully they can pay it forward's kind of cliche, but honestly that's something I hope that
All these cliches are cliched because they've been said over and over and again, and they're truths.
right.
They're truths. So, how can people get in touch with you, Chris? And of course, we'll have all the information once we get you out there. But how can they
No,
get in
I'm
touch with you?
I'm I'm happy to talk to anyone. You can feel free. I'm at my company's at winnow.law, winnow.law. I think all of my contact information is up there, and I'm as much as I possibly can. I also do charitable events. I've been a Children's Hospital Orange County ambassador for a number of years. My son would not be alive without them. So wherever I can give back, I want to give back, and I will show up, and I will speak if I can help motivate a group of people or whatnot. And it's something that I got to spend. I mean, honestly, especially as it relates to children's health, I got to spend the rest of my life giving back everything I possibly can. My wife does too, because if it weren't for the doctors and the nurses and everyone working at Children's Hospital Orange County, my son would not be alive today. He's doing great, by the way. He's just started high school last week, and he's doing wonderful. But without them, he wouldn't be here. So the scales are not aligned yet. I've got to spend the rest of my time on this earth doing everything I can to not put parents in an awkward or uncomfortable or completely untenable situation that we could have been in had we not been around absolutely world-class care. Because there are especially parents in rural areas that do not have the choices, did not have the resources available to them that we did 3 miles away from where we live.
Beautiful. Okay, so once again, thank you, and we will continue this conversation.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
so much. Oh, my pleasure.